Greetings, chess friends. Sometimes you play a chess game that is so ingrained and burned into your memory, you'll never forget. This was one of those games, and really not decided until the final move. An unbelievable occurrence, which many players in the open section were even talking about several rounds later. So you can see I decided not to use my opponent's actual name. He was a very nice guy, but I thought I didn't want to really pile on this really lightning striking an incredible moment. So let's jump into the game, which actually was very interesting. And then we'll kind of see at the end the shocking finish to this one. So this is round 5 in the tournament. I have 2 points out of 4, and I am playing with the black pieces. So let's get into the Sicilian defense. E6. I like these approaches a little more than the standard D6. I noticed my opponent, by the way, actually was unrated FIDE, which always comes with a bit of hesitancy and just kind of let's be careful, and was roughly 2100 US chess. In addition to that, he had not played a rated game for some 6, 7 years. So he was getting back into chess. Strong player, no doubt, but I was definitely careful. So let's jump into this. When they play c4, this is a good setup for white, this so-called Maroczy bind. I believe that Maroczy never played this, only suggested it, I think, as the story goes. But here we go. So the point of this is kind of to prevent the black ideas of playing b5 or d5 at some moment, and just taking general space in the center. So b6, kind of standard idea. And here, very interesting. I must have misplayed the move order here because the engine gives bishop e3, very standard move, missed win. And now I was really intrigued. Stunning moment here where actually the move knight d5. Black is really in trouble here. You can imagine moving away is not fun or safe. So let's analyze capture. And the point of all this, there's several points, especially rook e1. The king is slow to get castled here. We're in already a direct line of fire. Also, our knight and rook really buried away here. And even a move like developing our bishop, it just runs right into rook e1. And from there, this bishop is pinned, and you cannot castle still. Piece down for just one pawn. But actually white is clearly better there. So that absolutely was not on my radar, and that would have been an early knockout. So here we go. Rook c1, bishop e7, f4, a very aggressive approach. Knight bd7, and f5. So for my money, this was really the first interesting moment of the game. Obviously, that knight d5 totally escaped both of us. So f5, early to be striking here, although white has developed nearly every piece, so conceptually it makes sense. They are also castled. This pawn is immediately hanging, so we have to address it. And moves like knight c5 or knight f8 are really not desirable. I thought really there was only one candidate move to be considered, which was e5, which is what I did. And I had a feeling the next move was coming. I saw knight d5. So a really interesting moment here. Not typical, the clash begins so early, but here queen d8. Really don't want to be taking this with either piece. Notice when they take with the c-pawn, this rook becomes an outstanding piece, and just moving our queen wherever you think here, b8 or d8, is really running into something like knight. Well, I was going to say knight c6, but the engine is also giving knight e6. Fantastic. Those knight sacks are so possible. Wow. So knight d5. I played queen d8, which is the best move. I want to point out here knight takes bishop, which appears to be natural, immediately losing to e takes d4. Now white has 2 minor pieces hanging. We just traded, but we have 2 pieces under attack. So actually, you cannot do that, and he did play knight e2, and I followed with bishop takes d5. A critical trade when you're trading a bishop for a knight, especially early on in the game. But I thought this gave black a number of advantages, minor but significant. First, that usually a piece on d5, a knight, is desirable for white. Many Sicilians go like this. When the pawn structure is set up like this, a knight fits very nicely right there. So he doesn't have a piece there anymore, but a pawn. On that same note, this d-pawn is a chronic weakness in these structures. And so by capturing, I really get rid of a good piece there and cover this d6 pawn as it's no longer really on the open d file in the line of fire. So I thought this was a real benefit. In addition to that, I thought this e4 pawn was going to be a weakness the rest of the game. That being said, the endgames I thought would be good for black. So we did give away a bishop, but I thought there were other real advantages to this. And the engine gives equal here, but essentially black is a tiny bit better or has it at least equalized. Black has won the opening battle, let's say. Bishop g5. This bishop is often the guard of this pawn, but it doesn't need to do that task anymore. You can imagine the dark squares here getting very weak, especially e3 with these moves on tap. And you can't even ignore this. A move like h3 immediately losing material to knight e3. So we've attacked queen and rook, and if you take, that's a trade, and then we've attacked king and rook. So black is winning material right away. So bishop g5 comes with a threat. He plays rook f3, which feels clumsy. A good move, but it feels unnatural, not what white is trying to do. Again, this bishop bumping into the pawns, the knight, not too many great squares forward. I felt good about this position. And the engine's still just kind of saying equal. So here, b5, and not so sneaky threat of queen b6, and then that would at least allow knight f2. No ways to block. Again, the dark square is very vulnerable now after that bishop was traded. So rook c6, a good move, and to counter all those good things that I've been saying about black's position, white does control the only open file, the c file, as well as this key c6 square. We saw in other variations perhaps a knight landing there. Well, actually this rook lands here and is just a strong piece. I really considered knight b8 here. Appears to be the best move, but I did not play this move. Expecting something like rook c1 or 2. And notice you cannot play this idea anymore, knight f2, where he'll just take it. Queen takes, and then actually the back rank is very weak. Easy to blunder this because you don't typically see the back rank weak, and it wasn't until we put our knight back to b8. So that did not happen, but just a little... I definitely considered knight b8, but did not go that route. So I played queen b8 with the same idea to play queen a7, also supporting the pawn, and I thought this was a logical move. Knight g3, that guards the f2 square, and h5. I really felt good about this position, even a little surprised to see that white is slightly better. I thought the white minor pieces were just really at a dead end here. The bishop, not so good. The knight, not so good. And again, somebody's going to have to guard this e4 pawn forever because one of these knights will just be sitting here watching it. So feeling good here, although, of course, I didn't know the engine eval. Here, a move, actually seeing now that it's the best move, I'm a little bit proud of this next move. A very tempting to play move like queen a7 or h4 and really mixing it up. But I just calmly played knight back to f6, which is the best move, which I was happy to see. He played rook back to f1, likely going to c1, queen a7 check, and queen f2. I saw this move, and again, going on the things I mentioned earlier, I thought black really had a good situation here. To trade queens, let's get to an endgame, and we're in good shape. So that's what we did. Notice the move knight c5 coming next, which does happen. That attacks the bishop and this pawn, and we can kick this defender away. So you really need to take with the king here, and then anticipating next king e3, which guards pawn and bishop. So that's exactly what happened. Knight c5 attacking the bishop, king e3, king d7. This rook is a little offsides, but really can't be threatened, at least not by one of our knights, comfortably. Rook c1, h4. Again, tiny, tiny edge for black according to the engine here, but essentially equal, an equal game. Knight f1, actually a good move here, and he's going to hop to e3 eventually. That's his idea. And here I'd say the first real mistake of the game by me, black. Rook a7. I was really dreaming of something that wasn't as good as I had thought, essentially. So this rook h5 and rook g5. This was kind of the idea I had in mind. Seeing that this pawn has the classic one holds two situation, this g2 pawn will be a target, and even the rook could land on g3 and the knight moves and be a good piece. This was my idea, and I thought, how do I hold the queen side together? Let's just play rook a7. The first real mistake in the game. Engine giving just a very natural rook c8 as the best move. So not good. b4, knight takes, king takes, all very natural. And here, again, kind of just following through with my poorly timed plan of rook h5. Not good. And this, there was some time pressure. I don't have it as exactly the minutes that we had left. I didn't write it down, but definitely some time pressure in this game. So that contributed, but really more important than that, just complete misunderstanding by me. These rooks actually do have a way in. I thought I had this all held together. I was also looking for knight e8, keep it all tied together. But he actually has a very simple way, which is rook b6 and other rook to c6. That's going to threaten the pawn and the d6 pawn and the a6 pawn. So let's see that, because it does happen. Rook b6, a really good move, actually. I was a little surprised by this one. Rook g5, and almost helping him to make a good move. I don't know why that gets an exclamation point. Very natural. But I realized here I'm in some trouble, and I don't know how to stop the very natural move coming, rook c6, and just losing key pawns everywhere. So I realized the danger here, and kind of lashed out a little bit. a5, which is the best move, but it's really just a desperate attempt. Rook c6 anyway, and we can only guard this pawn with our knight, but that just runs into other problems. Now the b5 pawn is hanging. Just really, this has fallen apart. White is clearly better now. A takes b4 is the best move, and I was just dreaming of some counterplay with check, and then as the king moves back, we're able to take this pawn. There's also a check here. You could even see this knight getting pinned from one of the rooks. So there is some danger, if only it were my turn, but sadly not the case. Rook takes d6, material back to equal, but white is clearly in charge. This was a well-played game right up until, I would say, maybe rook a7. Both players really on target. But now things really start to get in that chaotic time of the game, and I just did not handle myself well at all. So a really well-played game by my opponent, and more than deserving of the full point. Rook takes d6. Here was an interesting moment, because I just played the human move, king e7. But the engine pointed out a little bit more sturdy defense was king c7. Didn't really consider this seriously. And let's look at a variation. Rook a6. Natural moves. Rook takes, rook takes. Rook g3. That was kind of part of my plan anyway. But how to make use of this? I kind of saw a dead end here. But actually the engine shows a nice way. King c6. Even rook takes pawn. White is now one pawn ahead, and it looks dire. This is a great protected passer, a rook on the 7th. But the move that escaped me was really knight d7. Knight d7. And this was really essentially the move that connects all the dots for black, because we threaten the king, of course, is in check, and then this pawn will fall, and that also guards d6, and then really everything kind of comes together roughly equal here. So a shocking turn of events. That didn't happen, and even in a classical game, I don't know if I would have, well, this was a classical game, but even with plenty of time, I don't know if I would have found that. So king e7 it is, and black is clearly worse. Rook a6, another good move here. And this was just panic time for me. I played knight d7, blitzed it out as the time is ticking away. And my opponent just plays excellent chess, really, here. So f6. Bravo. That's a great chess move. And I had glanced at this in some earlier variations, but here I just played knight d7 quickly, and this move just lands with a thud. What can we do? We capture with the pawn. And the point is now that capturing this rook, I capture that rook, is all met by knight f5. Nearly checkmate. The only king move is to play king c5, and that just drops the knight for absolutely nothing. So we have to sacrifice, and this is tantamount to resigning. Black is just losing here. Despite, you think, okay, we have rook versus knight, one extra pawn, but it's just really not real. And the pawns are miserably doubled and poorly placed. So knight c5, that's a check. And here, I think a place where I can really improve, when you're losing these games, it's easy just to kind of get dejected and play quick moves and not give it so much effort, but I really could have put up some better resistance here. So the engine does give king d5 and then knight e4. I'm surely losing here, but at least it's a little more resistance, which is a hallmark of strong players. So we're guarding this pawn, at least maintaining knight and pawn, but we're also threatening knight c3 at some key moment. And that would be our only chance here, would be those b pawns getting rolling. So, for example here, by the way, rook d7, just a move, is +1, not too bad. A move like rook h7, you could see that being played, is 0.5. So, okay, engine is climbing a little here, 0.8. But the game is not out of reach. And you can imagine maybe a really strong player holding on. But anyway, this game takes a wild turn. So let's take a look. I played in the game, instead of that, we just said king takes pawn and knight e4. I played knight a4. Again, these are just that phase in the game where you're playing quickly. You know it's over. You both know it's over. And just kind of walking through the motions. I wish here I could play knight d5. Unfortunately, the rules of chess don't allow it. So king takes d5 as I was in check. Rook a6, another good move. My opponent has played excellent chess. Now we've made the time control. After knight c3, we both made the 40th move. Plenty of time left. My king is cut off. Essentially, it's time to resign. My opponent asked me after the game, and you'll see in light of what happens, I don't know why I kept playing. I couldn't answer you. There one slight answer, maybe. The players on the board next to me asked to borrow my set, and they were still playing. So I said, okay, I'm going to have to wait a few minutes anyway. Why not make a few chess moves and see what happens? We're defending the pawn. I don't know why I kept playing. But then he took this, and I thought, wait a minute. Back to equality, material equality. Clearly, the king for white is better placed. These pawns are just stuffed by this one pawn. Two pawns are held tight by one. But I felt the glimmer of hope. F7, a very natural move, gets an exclamation point, but I think everyone would play that. And again, here, clearly white is winning. The king is just so superior and faster to go gather up the pawns. But I calculated here all the way to the end. It's just a lot of king moves. Usually the endgames are these long variations. But essentially, I just kept playing because I had already calculated it, I guess. Hard to really explain. I knew I was lost here, no doubt. So the king is just faster. It's not even close. And there we go. White queens. We're even pinned here. If it weren't for this pawn, you could imagine some king a1, and you can't take because of stalemate, but that's not even the case here. just tragic here. So I kept playing again a little. You don't see that too much at a high level. Players playing it out down a queen. Um, I'm not sure what to say, but King B1, and here the unforgettable moment. So plenty of time for both players. My opponent grabs his queen, places it over A4, and goes back. And he mutters something like, I haven't moved yet. I wrote down the Q. It's a touch move, of course. Thinks for a couple seconds. Grabs the queen. And places it on A3. This is an over the board game, folks, not a mouse slip. I was just at a loss for words. I looked for a second. I captured the queen, and he stood up and just yelped out. The whole room turned and just resigned the game. Remarkable finish to this game. Black wins. Black just wins. So I guess what to say about this, I really felt bad. And like I said, this gentleman handled this very maturely. We analyzed the game after pretty thoroughly. Really nice guy. I cannot say I would have handled this so well. I would have been looking for the closest window to jump out of. I mean, this is just an unbelievable situation. And I started thinking about it after. Um, I think, for example, all of us have played Puzzle Rush, and when you get a bare end game with just a few pawns, it takes a second to get oriented. Which way am I going, right? My pawns going up or down? I feel like these double pawns looking a little strange. My king also all the way on his side of the board. I feel like almost he lost his orientation, which way the pawns were going. I don't know how else to describe this. He said he was calculating the two sacrifices, for example. Well, not two, but just sacrificing here and just taking. And he was kind of quickly calculating. Of course, that's completely winning. Um, Probably the most human way. But he placed his queen on A3. Unbelievable, unforgettable. And for me, even as the winner of this game, a little bit embarrassed I was as the winner. I mean, this is just kind of, you know, not a deserving win. What else can I say? So that's why, again, I chose not to put his name on this one because I didn't want to pile on or make this any kind of, you know, teasing or embarrassing moment. But he really deserved the win, and I did not. And there's not much else to say. Sometimes these things happen. Players flag and they're winning and such. So a really remarkable one, kind of so-called over-the-board mouse slip. And we've heard of players maybe calculating a long line and then they play the second move first, something like that. So unforgettable, I'm sure, for both of us. So that's really it. This puts me back at a plus score. So going into the next day of the tournament, we are at 3 out of 5 and certain to play a very strong player and with the white pieces. So stay tuned for that next one. And I really appreciate the views. Hope you're enjoying this recap of the 2024 Southwest Class Championships. We'll see you soon.